dark blue part on the?
So we'll go ahead and get started.
Jump in.
Okay.
And I have microphones up here. I don't know if I need one, but a little later we'll kind of open it up to discussion. I know some other folks are kind of soft-spoken, so I'll just, I'll pass the mic around later when we get into the conversation. But if you folks can hear me fine, I'll just continue with that one. So this dark blue, this is actually, and this is kind of misleading. This is partisan lenience in Nelsonville.
Oh.
And so, I don't know, I'm a little bit colorblind, but I believe there's a little bit of red in here. And but it's, like I said, it's misleading because this dark blue is like you maybe have 3 voters out there, and like one's a registered Democrat and the other 2 are like independent, and so it's all blue. so yeah, it's but some of these darker areas will probably be like, I don't know, I'm guessing like college students, more dense populations here, and then you'll see more like, and again, like, because the population numbers are so small, like there'll be a big swing. Before this, the colors might only be a couple voters, like difference. So, like I said, it's kind of misleading. All in all, Nelsonville is pretty 50-50 as far as like statewide general elections over the last 10 years is what Dave's usually tracks.
50-50 Republicans and Democrats?
Well, I mean, we're gonna get into Nelsonville demographics later, and we can like dive deeper into that. But it's probably like 48-52, 52% Democrats. But a lot of folks, like Nelsonville reflects the rest of the state. Like there's more independents than there are registered Democrats and Republicans.
Wow.
So quickly, I'm gonna kind of recap our last meeting in April. It was basic. I was kind of going over, just the kind of criteria of wards and like the makeup of wards. And I do have, I don't know if folks saw, there's some FAQ. I brought maybe like 20 up there. Yep, and there's like, kind of covers everything I went over last time: wards, census blocks, precincts, kind of general criteria about Ohio Revised Code, other things as like what kind of best practices of districting, and so went over timeline and everything, and kind of a look forward into some like tools and resources that I'll be able to share with you tonight. Again, really quickly, like 2 hard rules that are federal rules on your districting plans: equal protection clause and federal voting rights, equal population and minority representation. And then this more detailed state outline rules in the Ohio Revised Code. And like I said last month, this basically boils down to 3 other requirements: respecting political boundaries, like county lines, municipal, city lines, contiguity, keeping things together. They can't be like, you can't have a district with patches like of a district in pieces. And compactness, try and keep them whole and not stretched out all over the place. You want to keep them nice and compact. And then again, some other best practices, kind of respecting existing precincts, polling locations, kind of keep an eye on future population growth trends, laws, representational proportionality, again, going back to the census block map, kind of respecting Nelsonville's political leanings, kind of reflecting that in the makeup of the council. And then communities of interest. And that's what we're gonna really dive into tonight, are communities of interest. And I believe it's one of the most important things in districting. Because what redistricting is a reflection of the community's needs and concerns and issue policies, priorities, and who they elect to represent them should be fighting for those things in assembly or a Congress or a city council. And so this community, and it's you're always stronger, you're always louder, voice is always louder when there's many. So that's how you influence our policymakers. And so these communities really are like a bulwark of democracy. And so what are communities of interest to their neighborhood, a group of people? And really, there's been a lot of discussion and argument about what communities of interest are. There was a lot of back and forth over the redistricting process that Ohio went through for our assembly maps and our congressional maps. But really what it boils down to is environmental, social, and policy concerns. Folks, and what it is not, is really our political loyalties. It's not about separating Democrats and Republicans or any other party. It's not about protecting incumbents or a cadre of politicians or candidates. This is about community concerns. And right now, there are 24 states that actually address communities of interest within their state constitutions, directing the folks who create districts and wards to respect these communities of interest as much as possible and not divide them by district lines. And so here are some examples. First, neighborhood associations. This is what I'm hoping to do tonight, is kind of identifying some of these communities of interest here in Nelsonville. Neighborhood associations or block clubs, that urban or rural interest, urban versus rural interests, different policy issues, housing patterns and living conditions. That could be like, renters versus owners. Again, going back to the map, there may be pockets of student housing that are most possibly renters, and so maybe they want someone that represents them that has that will stand up for renters and has their concerns as a priority. Cultural, religious, and language characteristics, community centers, parks, reserves, like historic districts. You have a historic district downtown, maybe you want to keep that whole. Maybe you want to, kind of balance that between representatives, income levels, educational background, school districts. I think you all share a school district here in Nelsonville, so that's not a big priority here. What we're doing, but it is for when we were going through the assembly mapping in the last 4 years. A lot of concerns about school districts. Demographics, household size, employment and economic patterns. You know, we have some big economic drivers here in Nelsonville. You know, where do their employees work? Health and environmental conditions, and then this may not be a big one here either, but like different communication and transportation networks like media markets and large transportation hubs. So this is our current precincts here in Nelsonville. It'll go left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm not sure exactly when the last time these were changed.
Are they equal in population?
Oh, no, precincts don't, so precincts don't need to be equal in population. They just need to have under 1,400 registered voters. And that's more for like the, you know.
So these are voting precincts, not wards.
Right.
Yes.
These are voting precincts. And as I had mentioned, like one of the things that you want to do in redistricting is kind of be mindful of your current precincts, because most times each precinct in a district will have its own polling place. But here, I understand in Nelsonville, everybody votes in the same place. So we don't really, you know, we don't have to, you know, pay too much respect to these current precinct lines, because the Board of Elections will, once you draw new districts, the Board of Elections will mostly change those precinct lines to reflect your districts.
So the Board of Elections creates the precincts?
Yes. And the only rule is that they can't have more than 1,400 registered voters.
Okay.
Alright, this here, and it's a little messy, I'll explain. It's because it was kind of difficult to look like. This was Dakota, Saul shared this map with me, an old PDF of a 1950 ward map of Nelsonville. And I tried my best to upload that into Dave's redistricting. But census blocks have changed since then, so I can't follow those lines exactly. So what you'll see here, what I did was, because right here, this census block is attached to all this right here. So in 1950, none of this was Nelsonville here. It was all this red part here, straight up, none of that. This red part straight here was Ward 1. Ward 2 was this blue part here, outlined with that yellow. It doesn't take that little jag to the right, just straight up that yellow. All that blue was Ward 2. Ward 3 was everything in green here, kind of like a little Texas panhandle up there in the front, and then kind of cuts down here and goes over the river, grabs a little bit of land west of the river here, but nothing, it stops at the river there, so nothing west of the river through down here. But then Ward 4 was all of this here, and then it kind of had these lines out here. None of this was Nelsonville, none of this here. And this was a little bit less, populated. It's a little bit less blocks within there, but it's interesting. I found it interesting because the current precincts, you can see where they've stayed the same and where they've kind of grew. And so you'll see like that basic line straight down between 1 and 2 is pretty much still there. Except I think, is this Oak Street that goes up through here? There's like
Up over top of one of those?
yeah, there's like two roads that kind of diverge like this. Yeah, so they'll flip between, the line will flip between back and forth right there, but essentially that line is identical to 1950 right there.
Ah, I see.
And same right down this division here, which I think is starts with a W, maybe.
Is it Watkins?
This one that goes
No, that's the other street.
perpendicular. I think it might cross the river.
No.
Well, we can look closer, but
Is
like that hasn't changed.
Is that like Hope Drive? Okay, alright.
That hasn't changed either. Well, we can look. We'll look. Take a deeper dive. But and then, so like your Ward 1 and 2. Ward 2 is like essentially the same as 1950 there. Or precinct. I'm sorry, because it's not a ward, but your precincts. And then the precinct here went down, grabbed the college and spread out here to the east, and then the third one kind of went up there to the northeast.
Sir?
Yeah.
I know someone who lives on Perry Ridge and her address is Nelsonville. And I know when you go to Buckle, there's a certain place where it says Nelsonville. This looks like the city, but Nelsonville must be much bigger if these people have that address.
Well, postal, yeah, there's some things about postal codes. So I live in Valley View, Ohio. We are an enclave in Columbus. I have my own mayor, I have my own little city council. Well, it's a village council. I think we only have 600 people, 650 people. A little village council, but we're like surrounded by Columbus. You go a few blocks out of the way and you're in Columbus. And my postal address says Columbus. Like, I don't have a Valley View address.
Columbus takes up most of Franklin County, but not all of it, and also bleeds a little bit into the surrounding counties. Sorry, I just know it.
You'll get a Columbus postcode. Yeah, they'll swallow you up. Columbus postal code.
So these rural areas are Nelsonville, but they don't count as a city?
Right, they're not in the municipal boundaries.
City limits.
Yeah, they're not in the proper city limits. So these are your official city limits there.
It looks like it does stretch into a little bit of Buckdole.
That's the annexation, so we can revise.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's entirely part of the block.
Actually, we can take a deeper dive
Okay.
into what the maps look like. I did want to show you first what we've got going for our website. So this will be, I think this is up and running live. I wanted to check it before we got started, but I forgot. But my colleague, who's been a fantastic help, has set this up for us, and I believe if you go to League of Women Voters, I'll make sure everyone you just go to the League of Women Voters of Ohio's webpage, lwovohio.org, and then from there you'll be able to link to Nelsonville redistricting, or you can just type in lwovohio.org/Nelsonville redistricting. It'll take you to this page. We're going to try and get the city council to put it up on the website, and we'll make sure everyone hopefully has easy access to this information, and also it's a place where we can gather input and feedback from citizens. So you'll be able to hit anything here in the menu, and it'll drop down. But first, most importantly, you'll have this submit public comment. This will be a kind of an open dialogue on the website, so it'll be public, kind of like a discussion on that folks will be able to have a public discussion and comment on the process, anything that they're concerned about or ideas, drop them in there. A little bit of background. kind of our focus, what we're doing there. And I went through all this last month here, but basically we just, that City Council has kind of looked to has asked the League of Women Voters of Ohio and Athens County in particular to help with this ward map process. And what kind of our goals, just to engage in a transparent and inclusive process. That's why we're holding these public meetings and trying to get as much input from community members as possible before we submit a possible map to City Council, which is strictly advisory. We don't have any authority to draw maps, and well, I'll get into that later. Kind of what our function is as the league here in the process. But we do want to use this kind of as a model for future districting processes that other cities go through, because you're supposed to do this every 10 years, after the census. Every city should do a review of their city council districts or wards and make sure that they fall within equal population. And that's generally, within 10% deviation from the lowest district to the highest district. So every city should be doing that. But I believe some of them are falling a little bit behind. But there are city charters that require cities to review even, more frequently than that, every 5 years, every 2 years. So we want this to be a process that is a model that other cities can look to and say, look what Nelsonville did down there. They did a fantastic job, and their wards are actually a product of the people of Nelsonville. I believe that is a super cool thing, and I want everywhere. I want all of our cities in Ohio to experience this kind of open process and be a part of drawing their districts, being a part of their democracy in their city. And so there's a timeline, and you'll be able to get recordings, past recordings. You can see the recording from April 27th on there. You'll be able to, check out the event page for future ones, and I'll get them up as soon as possible. We'll have a couple next month. And then there's a quick overview about redistricting criteria. And then there's a great FAQ in there that we had passed around up there that folks have about local redistricting. It's specific to Nelsonville. And then some other resources that we'll have is a link to Dave's redistricting app. And you don't need to be like a professional. I will have there's not linked yet, but I will have a short guide to Dave's redistricting. You don't even have to, just to view the map, and we'll take a look at it. You don't need to have an account. You just need to check, agree to terms, and hit accept, and then it'll drop you right there to Dave's, and you can look at the map. You can see the demographics, statistics. But if you do want, and I encourage you, if you're into this, please do make your own map. We've stuck a template up there, all right, that will take you to Dave's. You'll make an account. All you need to do is name and email. That's all. It's super easy, and then you'll be able to do all the cool things that Dave's redistricting app can do. And there's a lot to it, but in that short guide, I'll teach you just the basics of when you drop on that map, how to paint districts, how to erase, and then kind of what you're going for, how to show different layers. But it'll be all in that short guide, and like I said, it's not difficult. So I encourage folks to take a look. So once you hit it, it'll drop you here. And I've done everything, if you're into Dave, if you know Dave's, to set up a map, you'll have to go in and number your wards and kind of select you know, I've everything's done for you. All you just drop it here, and then you'll hit make a copy. And then when you hit that make a copy, it'll ask you to make a Dave's account.
Is that an acronym or a name of someone?
His name is Dave, and you know what? His last name is fleeting in my memory at the moment. But he's like, you know, he's been a mapping guru for quite a number of years, and quite arguably has the most user-friendly open source mapping tool that's available.
Is it Dave Wasserman?
Yeah, yeah. So Dave's redistricting app, I don't believe he's actually in like CEO anymore or in control, like he's passed the torch. But still, it's a fantastic mapping tool that's free and open to the public and very user friendly. And a lot of redistricting committees actually use Dave's redistricting to do the districting because it's free and it's accurate. Otherwise, you're getting into like Esri or Maptitude, which is a paid tool, and a lot more difficult. You need to know coding and things like this. But I'm not a coder, but I am super into Dave's. So if you have questions, ask me about it. But you'll drop here and you'll just make that copy. It'll ask you to make an account, just name it and add email address. And then it'll take you right back here. And then you can, let's see, I'll go ahead and make a copy. Actually, let me go to where I'm already logged in, I'm sorry.
So is there communities of interest data buried in there somewhere that you can pull out? I mean, I know there's other kinds of data.
Yeah, there is not.
Okay, so that's something you have to take into it yourself when you're working with it.
Yeah, it's yeah, communities of interest, like there is a tool called Districtor, and it's district with a little R at the end. But that app is also a free mapping tool, and it's more geared toward communities of interest. But they have a published mapping that you can type in, like, you know, Athens, and you can see communities of interest that people have submitted. And that's kind of what I was doing, you know, a few years ago when I was traveling around. I was getting folks to kind of make these, there we go, community maps and kind of advocate for them to be kept whole within our House districts and Assembly districts. And so we submitted hundreds of community maps to the redistricting commission, and you can find those on Districtor. Who is that? The Citizens, Ohio Citizens
Yeah.
Redistricting Commission, and Equal Districts. They did their own map, like a citizens map for Ohio's 99 districts. That was a conglomerate of thousands of community maps that were submitted by their volunteers and members of And all those can be found on Districtor as well. And I've actually got that resource, the Districtor link, in the resources on the webpage. So you can go and kind of look at community. I'm not sure if we had anything from Nelsonville. Sorry. But you'll make that copy, and here you'll make your account, and then it'll take you back here. And then what you're gonna do, a lot of times to start mapping, you'll start by precinct, but since we're going so local, you're gonna wanna switch that to block over here. And then you're gonna just,
Census blocks?
yep, and these are census blocks, and then you'll hit the precinct that you wanna start drawing in. And then see it breaks up into, and then it also breaks the neighboring precinct into blocks as well. So it broke up Ward 1 into census blocks, and it broke Precinct 2 into census blocks as well. And so then you'll just go up there and you'll pick your ward. First you wanna go to paint up here. So right now we're just on like pan, we can move around. You wanna go up here and you'll hit paintbrush, and then you're gonna wanna go over here and pick your ward. And then, see, they'll start highlighting these census blocks. And you can start painting. Alright, and then over here, you wanna switch this to district details. And this is all in the guide, but then once you switch it to district details, it'll tell you what you're highlighting. So everything that I've highlighted red here, we've got, there we go. So you have to hover it over it. I'm sorry, I was like, why is that population so high? First, you have to hover over the district that you're putting in. Alright, and then over here on the right, it'll tell you what you've highlighted. So we've got a total population of 523, a voting age population of 434. It'll get you your demographic breakdown of folks, and then it'll tell you their partisan leanings there, what the voting has been for the last general elections, statewide general elections over the last decade. And then you have a here on the left right there, you'll see your target population is 1,153 people. That's how many folks you want in each district. Now, there's a little bit of hiccup, and I'm not sure how to go about it. I've reached out to a few people, but as you know, Nelsonville, when they did the census, the census has a different number for population in Nelsonville than Ohio does. So in any census information you bring up, it's gonna have the 2020 census. And it's gonna tell you that Nelsonville had 4,700 and some people. And so we are dividing the city by that number. I believe he's auditor now, Mr. Sappington, did a recount and was able to keep Nelsonville's status as a city and bump that population number up to like 5,370 something. But they didn't record, it was kind of a coalition effort. There is knocking doors. I'm not sure if they had a list of exact I've been trying to get it from the Secretary of State, like a list of, citizens that they were able to count for their enumeration, but, yeah, they haven't given that to me. I don't know if it's available. And it might be, you know, sufficient to use, the 2020 population number, and then, do a recount, once the 2030 census comes in, kind of do another review, make sure everything's in alignment. Or, you know, that's a problem we can, you know, we'll set aside. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not sure, what to do. I'm trying to work with the Hocking College, and maybe if we can get the, addresses of the folks that they were counting, or at least the locations of census block, like numbers in the census block, we can have somebody upload, like, get that information into, Dave's, and we can be able to map the 5,370. But right now, we've got a total of 4,700 and 52, I believe. But you're gonna want to get to the equal population number is 1,153. So what you wanna do, basically, I'm sorry for making that so long-winded, but you're gonna fill this up, get these census blocks filled, until you hit 1153. And you can take this opacity down, so you can kind of see the streets behind there. That always helps. And then once you want to start calling other wards, you know, you just select your ward. You know, oops. You can undo, you know, color there. So once you get your map filled up, you can check to see if you're missing. You can check if you're missing, like census blocks. It'll find split precincts or missing, like unassigned census blocks. So once you get everything filled up, and what you want to shoot for, you'll go to the statistics here. What you want to shoot for is, you want this number right here. This is the deviation between the lowest populated district and the highest populated district. So right now that's at 47%. And that's kind of, funny enough, that's similar to what the precincts are right now in Nelsonville. They're about 45% deviation from the lowest to highest population. And so what you want to do is get that under 10%. Ideally, you want to get it to 0. You would like 1,153 people in each district, in each ward. But that's really difficult to do, especially when you're dealing with such a small population, because these census blocks could have anywhere from 0 to 1,000 people, even more. Like there's census blocks with like 8,000 people in them. And then there's census blocks that, you know, cover vast areas of land with nobody on them that have 0 population. But in Nelsonville, you're looking at anywhere from 0 to 200, and so there's a census block down in the college that's around 200 and some folks. And so you want to get that under 10%, closest to 0 as possible. And then, you know, when you're able to do that, you just want to save it and upload it to the website.
If you were to plug in the current precincts, do you happen to know what that disparity would look like? Like, if you
Yeah.
just map that as our ward maps, because I have a feeling it's not proportionate.
So this is the, put the map colors on. So to turn your district colors on, we'll just do that there. And like I said, I like to bring this down a little bit so we can see the streets behind there. And then here's your precinct lines. You can turn those on and off. But here's your current precincts. So precinct 1 has 1,098 people, so it's under 65 ideally. District 2, however, only has 756 people. And so under a few hundred. And that's your big issue right there, is that well, then number 4, district, or precinct 4, I'm sorry, precinct 4 here has 1,706 people.
What is that straight line near the bottom?
I asked it.
Yeah, I had that question last time, yeah, we found out that it's a bike path.
It's a
Oh.
railroad.
So it is still a railroad.
Railroad.
Yeah, that's the part that the railroad just ends,
Yeah.
and,
At the college.
yeah, at the college, and then that's the bed that went all the way to Athens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not part of the.
So it's not part of the city, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, the bike path is, what, county owned?
I would say that's probably
County owned developers?
Who is doing fixes where it's.
Well, cause it goes through
How many
not
people are
only.
in precinct 3?
So precinct 3 there you have 1,052. So you're under 101. So your big discrepancies between 2 and 4. 4's got 1,700 and 2's only got 750.
Jeez.
But again, it's like going back to those 1950 maps. Like you'll see this Ward 1 is almost at the ideal it's only under 65 people. So you wouldn't need, if you wanted to kind of keep that whole, you would only need to add a couple census blocks maybe to put that into balance. But again, there's a lot of reshaping to do basically around here. And then again, like I said, there's if you go into these blocks here, alright, so right here, so that census block, oh, I'm sorry, it's more than I thought. So that census block has a total population of 382. Alright, and you can't break that up. Census blocks are the lowest, building blocks that you can go. So you can't break this up. So right there, 380, that's a fifth. Wait, no. How many we need? 1153. Yeah, that's over a quarter of your district population is right there, just in that one census block.
I can't imagine that's accurate, because if that much population is just over Hawking College, those are all temporary, those are just students, they're here for 2 years or less.
If they register to
Right.
vote here though.
Yes, they're registered to vote here.
Well, they responded to the census in 2020.
Yes. As
And they're
a.
probably not there.
Yeah, they may or may not be registered to vote here, but they were registered in 2020 as living on campus at Hawking College. And there is, that is, colleges are, kind of, there's always issues around college about voting turnout and participation and precinct numbers, because again you'll have so that census block has 382 population, and every single one of them were of voting age. So you have your voting age population that up there too. And then, so you'll tend to have a higher voter registration, but turnout is always super low. So yeah, it's kind of, the census blocks that contain colleges are always an enigma, cause there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of,
Well, like,
coming in and out,
if they just-
transient folks.
Yeah, if they just did the census not during the school year 1 year, all of a sudden the numbers would plummet. It would create a very large, disparity between the two.
Yeah, they do it the same, what do they do, like August every year?
Takes a while.
Yeah,
They
so-
did the census during
COVID,
Yeah, look, so yeah, that's another issue, that's a whole nother issue with the 2020 count, is
Yeah,
just
so
because.
that's another thing, there were not 381 people on Hawking campus when the census took place.
Hawking College itself helped to count those kids, cause I worked for the census,
Okay.
and yeah.
That's great.
And I don't know if that's where, what we're looking at is like Villa Ruse Reynolds, is that?
No, so that right there is Hawking College.
The whole.
And I was going to Hawking at that time, and they sent everyone home. There was no one in the dorms.
But Hawking, it's somehow, I
They
believe,
might,
helped count their students, whether it was on that day, or, I mean, that's what I was told, so,
Now, do you think they might have like sent records of who was registered to those dorms? Even though they weren't physically there during COVID?
yeah, I mean, we should have, I mean, I went to Villa Ruse, this side of the private, yeah.
And in the end, those numbers were needed to keep it a city.
Yeah.
Keep Nelsonville
Oh, yeah.
city.
Which
Same thing
Hawking
happened
has,
to
which Hawking has deep interest in, which makes me think of Hawking Trust.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Well, you can say that about our auditor too.
No, that's
Census, don't they ask you if you're a temporary or a permanent resident? I was in the town part-time, but I wasn't a resident of Nelsonville at that time, in
No,
during
it's just if you
2020,
go out
when
and
they,
count the,
because I was
you're
counted
living in that spot on that day, that's where you get counted, is what my understanding.
Well, they
You don't have to give any other
Well,
information.
this, my family did not go through the door for a census taker in 2020.
I feel like I filed a census.
Oh, it was hard.
that was an issue like nationwide, like this, like, yeah, 2020 is a whole separate can of worms when it comes to
We
like the
got through that
census.
live.
And there's been a lot of,
Even their program.
lawsuits and things surrounding it, and you know, even, you know, this, when we were doing the Cleveland redistricting, you know, they had to drop 2 wards because of their population loss. A lot of folks was like, did we really lose this many people? Or,
They just.
or did they just not wanna talk to you?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot, it had a lot of, big effect on districting, that census, and so there'll be a lot of studies around that, I'm sure, for a while. It'll be interesting to kind of compare that to 2030 when we get there.
Well, when they're doing the census, I'm getting things in the mail today. I mean, like a week or so ago, from the census, wanting me to fill out information.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I did go online and look and see if it, cause it says I'll be in jail if I don't fill it out. But I did go on and look at this particular, it's not the US census, it's another one, but it does say that it is the census, but my gosh, they're like 20-some pages long. And I said, I'm not doing this thing, throw me in jail.
Yeah, take me to jail for
I
it.
don't care.
That's very strange.
Will be a very
I've
crowded
got them,
jail.
my son's got them, my daughter's got them.
They do like other counts,
Yeah, it says that it's from this, and it's legal.
And there are like,
So,
and there are actually, like, you can use, like, yeah, it's what they call it, like an ACS, estimate that the census conducts. They did one in 2022 that Dave's actually has in here. I don't know, I don't think that would change because, I don't think it would change much because the census, it would still be the census. I'm sure they would do.
It's strange how the top of the city, the northernmost boundary of the city is a straight line, and then everything else follows natural, it's not.
Yeah, that's your
Duh.
county line, yeah.
Yeah.
Duh.
Can you fix that?
They moved that line so many times.
Alright, so that's how, like, to create your own map and get in all that, but like I said, you don't need an account to, actually view it. So like to just view it, it'll drop you here, and you can look around, you can take a look at the statistics.
Yeah.
You can, there's different analytics here about compactness and competitiveness and things. Just interesting things you can look at. But now, what I really want to do is kind of go back to that, those examples of communities of interest. And I was wanting one of those, like, things you teachers, big notepad things. But what I would like is for folks, just to kind of go to this public comment portal. You can submit maps, drawings, street like names, like, and kind of see where in Nelsonville, like, these communities are. So, for example, like I was saying, that, for example, because you have this student population in the city, maybe a good idea to kind of keep those student rental properties together in one district, so they kind of have a single representative to advocate for them. Maybe, you want to keep more of these rural areas together that don't have, a lot of population out there, but the folks that do live out there probably have a lot of similar interests. You may want to follow these, kind of be true to tradition and try and, like, not disrupt voters by trying to keep your precincts at like whole as much as possible.
Well, any adjustment to the precincts won't really have any impact on voters because we
Right.
all vote in the same place.
Yeah. But there's always, you always need to, kind of just, because I'm not sure, I think Reed Courtney was telling me last time that there used to be a couple different polling places.
Yeah, not that long.
Back when we had a higher population.
Well,
Enough registered voters.
well, maybe with the direction of the city's going, new council, new direction and ideas, you can kind of bring some more folks into the city, and kind of juice up your population, but also just, not only population, but
Voter registration.
like voter engagement and community engagement. And so, there might be, like, maybe you wanna take a look at existing locations that may be considered for polling locations, cause you know, there's requirements about polling locations that need to be fulfilled. So maybe you wanna look at those old polling locations and you know, just keep them in mind. But you're right, as like precinct, because we're all voting in one location, you know, keeping these precinct lines may not be the biggest priority for you, but you know, that's what we wanna talk about, is like, what are the priorities for people in Nelsonville? Like, what would a community map look like, and how would that be reflected in your city council? So I'll just,
I can talk loud enough,
yeah, we'll just pass it around.
thank you. I happened to be talking when I was waiting at the door today to a person that was here, and she was wondering about how people didn't vote in precincts anymore, and they were voting in one place. And she said, well, there's some people that can't even get to the precincts because they don't have transportation, they can't walk to them, and having it in one place, she thought might be a benefit. Now, that's only one person, but she does a lot around with different people, so I think that's worth thinking about and appreciating. That's all I have to say. That's all my door talk.
Let's see, there we go. No, check. There.
It's the placebo effect.
There we go. Alright, who's next?
I have a question, but I will not take the mic.
Alright.
I just might not be on camera, but I do have a question. So outside of, places to vote, what do precincts impact?
The day-to-day operations of the elections. So it's about making sure voters have a polling location that is accessible
Okay.
and not only location-wise, but ADA and somewhere that's going to be inviting. A lot, sometimes they don't really stick to that, but
Precincts can also, precincts can sometimes vote on smaller issues like alcohol sales, Sunday alcohol sales and things that are approved in very small, very local things. They can be on the ballot in just a precinct. Yeah,
That wouldn't
I
apply
think that would be.
here. Athens is a dry county.
So like in our experience doing that work, if the legislature allowed for the community to vote to allow something like the mine to have Sunday sales, the people who are in that affected precinct can vote on it, but if you're over down near the ice house, it wouldn't affect you, so you're not allowed to vote on it. Where if you're going the entire Nelsonville, everybody can have a license, that would be an all for precinct issue.
Okay.
If I'm not sure if I'm doing that correctly.
Yeah, I think that's, so there are some very specific neighborhood things that get voted on in precincts, but they're much less common.
Okay.
Doesn't it also determine who represents, I mean, if we ever get to a point where there are council members.
That's the ward.
That's
Right?
not the ward.
Those are wards.
Okay, so I'm
Which
confusing the wards and the precincts again.
Line
Right.
up, but aren't
I've
the
been
same.
confused for months.
Well, that's when
And I will
once the
They're
city
similar, but not
draws
the same.
their wards, the Board of Elections has to make your voting districts match your wards so that people are voting for their correct
just-
zone.
But because we lost
So-
our wards with the charter, they've just been going off of the past map as we had and trying to.
I would assume so.
That's what I'm
I would
It
assume
does
so.
determine what individual person on council represents you in your.
I think that's gonna be what's at play post January when we make these maps, is there will be people running for specific districts, but not. As far as
I have a second question. Okay, so if precincts, specifically Nelsonville's precincts, because we are a dry county and smaller issues generally aren't voted voted on throughout the precinct itself. And we only have one voting location throughout Nelsonville that our precincts are failing us. That's what I'm
Unless it's
hearing.
an issue about not having enough volunteers to run the locations.
We can always get more volunteers. You can get people from outside of the city to volunteer. But the issue then becomes, the only place to vote is right here in Town Square. So people that go to Hockey College don't want to walk out here to vote. People who work on the full horse ranches don't want to come into town to vote. So,
It's also funding.
Yeah, so there's funding issues about,
so then why don't we
If
just
you
have
get
one
a
precinct?
direct,
Because it has to be less than 1,400. So I say we go down as low on the precincts.
not 14,000, 1,400.
1,400, yes, okay.
So you have
So
to
then,
have,
and you have to have at least 4 precincts.
Well, with the population under that, according to the census counts, we have more than 4,200.
you could have more than 4 precincts.
It's up to 4.
Yeah, up to 1,400. Once you hit more than, what's that, 5,200 registered voters, you'll need to add another precinct.
Okay.
So we'd have to go under a certain population to hold a precinct.
It seems to me like there's no point in having precincts if we're only voting in one location throughout the entire
That's
city.
why we're building wards.
you
Well-
can have, but those voters can have, different ballots. Like you will, once the new city council is in place, not everybody in the city is gonna have the same ballot, because you're gonna vote on different ward representatives.
The Ward 2 rep would be on our second ward ballot, where Ward 4 rep would have completely.
It doesn't really matter the location where you're voting, the polling place is
That's-
not the same.
It's separate, it's a separate issue from the precincts.
The one issue was, it's gonna have 4 precincts on
Precincts will have more weight
Create 'em all.
determining like, kind of, well,
Right.
yeah,
Well, and
the weight of a precinct can vary, from like, you know, there's not a lot right now that your precincts affect you specifically, but in other localities in Ohio, the precincts very important because it does, like sometimes it'll determine school district, like
Yeah.
it'll determine these levies and different.
Yeah, especially in like rural areas, the precincts will determine a lot about like municipalities and if you're on well water or some kind of city water or sewer.
And sometimes they don't change for decades. Like if there's no need
Ours
to
hasn't
change,
changed.
yeah. If there's no need to change, then they'll
And if people's access to a polling location is an issue of concern, that's an issue that you can bring up with the Board of Elections, and that's sort of separate from where the precincts are drawn.
Absentee vote, if you can't get.
You
Well,
can also
That's
request
not
a ballot.
accessible
Yes.
for everyone,
They can mail it to
especially
you.
now, absentee ballots are getting harder and harder to get.
Why is that?
It's difficult.
I thought the Board of Elections
And there
changed
is
them to
a-
one.
The accessible thing is more of like you can't have more than 14 because then you get overcrowded. You need to have a space. You know, like they want to make it efficient and practical for the workers and the voters. But like that's kind of an administrative thing.
It's a little separate than the
A
discussion
little
about
separate
warring
than
wards.
discussion about wards. Yeah, and like Adrian said, once you draw your new wards, the county will most likely just will use those as precincts as
Yeah,
well.
just swap them out.
Um,
how we got these weird
That's probably exactly how, well, not only that, but the population density, the reason precinct 4 or Ward 4 is so large is because that used to be a more rural area that sounded like.
And is Nelsonville big enough for block clubs? Like, are there like neighborhood associations or block clubs
We
that
don't
kind of
have
like take care of
HOAs.
certain communities?
We have maybe a couple like neighborhood watches, but not even.
CLG.
We all communicate through the Nelsonville Crackheads page.
Oh.
And what's next, Nelsonville?
And what's next? And
I've-
various
I've-
other
I've
Facebook,
followed
and various
both.
other Facebook groups, yes.
Yeah.
We could easily have, like themed coalition neighborhoods, it would just take a lot of citizen engagement.
Yeah.
A lot.
Mhm.
And then you wanna talk about a lack of volunteers.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody works and has
Yeah.
busy lives,
Participation.
yeah.
I don't, and then
What are you talking
And
about?
so, like, also the other thing, and about districts and wards, between like the way we vote here in Nelsonville now at large, they make it more, they're more tailored. You have, I think folks, citizens have more power to hold their representatives accountable for specific policies that they do or do not engage in. And so, and you can hold those representatives to account, for specific, like, electoral promises, like, you were elected for, this specific regional or like, local issue that we've been wanting to get taken care of now for years, and, have no follow through, and so now there's a more tight-knit, small, group of voters who have like kind of, the power, the voting power to keep that person there or replace them with someone else. So they're more accountable. Yeah.
I think the problem is there's just a lot of misinformation.
Yes.
So there is a very tight knit of voters, but they're voting for people who do not follow through on their promises or are voting I'm just a journalist, so like these are just my observations, but there is it kind of doesn't matter where people are ward mapped or whatever. As soon as you go on Facebook or like anything like that, there's just so much misinformation. I mean, that's why issue 4 failed.
Absolutely.
So I think, and a lot of that also has to do with poor communication on the council's part, but that also has to do with the constant, to talk about to talk about the word map drawing and to not, and obviously you don't need to know all of this that's happening in Nelsonville, but like I've been covering this city for like 6-7 months now. And like what I'm understanding is that the same things keep happening regardless of what is being said or done, because there is just so much misinformation that people can't like get it through their heads in a way. And it doesn't really matter who's writing about it, it doesn't really matter if the messenger's writing about it, if I'm writing about it, WOUB is reporting on it. Like when there are constant distractions, it takes away from, and that's
So-
like, I was just having a conversation with Joanne that Tuesday's meeting was one of the most, it was really long, but it was one of the most productive meetings I had covered in a long time, because there were things actually passed and
Getting done, yeah.
But that's the thing too, is that, when these ward maps are drawn, it's not gonna be under the charter, it's going to be under the statutory, and it'll be a whole different set of people who might not really care. So I understand that this is a nonpartisan civic agenda, but that being said, the civics in this town need a reboot if anything is gonna be solved, cause I don't wanna write about another lawsuit.
And how we solve this issue will set the precedent not just for the state, but any other city.
Well, it's like it's just a microcosm of what is happening.
Being
I
challenged.
will just say, if there are particular factions in a city, and they have support, general support overall within that city, enough to basically stay in power and do what they want. That's kind of a weapon against that is having districts, because the way you could kind of cut that power that they have broadly in the city, they may have 50%. But if you cut them down to a ward that they have to run in a district that they represent specifically, then it determines what their popularity is in that specific ward. And they may not, and just because the larger faction within the city may not pay attention, or maybe agrees with them or disagrees with them, it'll depend on that smaller constituency that he or she answers to specifically. And so, the voters have a lot more say in who's in council. Those pockets of voters, different districts, so you can have kind of a majority rules but minority protection. Like you'll be able to kind of put at least put up something against that kind of that larger influence, if you would.
The one thing, I don't get the radio, but several of my friends get the radio station, the station that's on at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. That everything is discussed on there by the people that have a strong opinion about what Nelsonville should be doing. Nelsonville should be doing. And that's where a lot of this information comes that people believe. They don't read the newspapers because what's on Viewpoint is the truth. And I can't attest one way or the other because I don't listen to the radio. But how can we work on that?
Well, it's not only that. It's because Nelsonville is such a tight-knit community. We are all friends with each other on Facebook, so someone can post something, misinformation or disinformation, and then that gets shared from person to person to person to person instead of through a group or through the radio over the TV. It creates a bit of a pipeline.
Mm-hmm. I'd also assert that, in this climate, speaking vulnerably and openly about local politics is very uncomfortable in person.
No, and you'll be threatened. You'll be threatened.
I've noticed people.
They don't want you to talk about it.
They don't want you to talk about it.
People get really annoyed
the best
when we
way
talk about politics,
to face misinformation, or maybe just places where you need clarity, is to have the conversations with people you care about, even if you don't agree, to find the core of the evidence and what's behind it. And I'm at a loss of that part of it. I hear a lot of opinions. I don't see a lot of evidence.
But that when you only discuss within your close-knit community, then you're not branching out to the people who are in these other pipelines that are getting this misinformation.
They won't listen.
And not only that, if you were to approach them, you'll be threatened with a lawsuit by someone, or
drive past your house.
they'll drive by your house and honk their horn. They will find out where you live and drive by your house. That's horrifying for a
safe and healthy
small
community.
local community.
Given also, again, and I apologize, I'm up
You're
in Columbus.
stuck in another politics now.
But I have been following, because it is very interesting. And I watched that kind of like docudrama series that WOUB did, like Unraveling Nelsonville.
Oh, I love that documentary. Yeah.
So I'm aware of like kind of the different players here, but districts may also be able to kind of like refocus these energies, like, because if you give these folks, something like priorities, like local district priorities that their constituents like are demanding from them, well then maybe like some of that other nonsense is kind of takes a back seat, hopefully, and
Yeah,
and they put their districts first, and kind of lead with their district council member head, instead of these, you know, Nelsonville Mafia or Good Old Boys or whatever the factions are.
I see your point, cause like, within your neighborhood, people know you.
Yeah.
It's not, when folks are running at large, there's a degree of removal
Yes.
from, you know, from areas of the city where maybe you don't spend as much time in or don't know as many people. But with wards, like, people are watching you, they have expectations of you.
Yeah. And you
And
may
they'll
feel
hold you
more
to that.
obligated to fulfill
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
You know exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that at some point we're gonna have to air out is, family members of people who may or may not be able to run
It's
it in their
rehashing.
place.
We'd be rehashing,
If
but
it
it's a
happened,
conversation
yeah.
to happen if it happens.
Mm-hmm.
We also have.
Yeah, I was just, I'm just throwing this up there, like, because, you know, Ohio being a home rule state, the districting kind of is delegated to the local, authority, like the local, governing authorities, so city councils, you know, usually it's committees within the city council that's doing the districting. But there are other, forms in Ohio. Some cities have independent citizen commissions. Some have like just politically appointed by council that are doing the redistricting. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. But there are also different, you know, redistricting criteria that they'll use. You know, like I said, the different years of review. Sometimes the deviation, the equal population number will be specifically stated in their city charter. I only bring this up because in Westlake, there's an amendment in their city charter that prevents nepotism. So like, you're not allowed to run if your family member is a sitting council member or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I just thought it was interesting. I didn't dive into it too deep, but
Westlake's quite a bigger community.
yeah, just
Yeah.
you know, different things you can do, you know, with the local governance. But I do want to thank everyone for coming out, and I would like to share. Let's see. I think. If you share me with your if you share your email with me before you leave, I'll be sure to send everyone a follow-up, and I'll put my links in. But I'll give you before you leave here, as I said, just go to lwvohio.org/Nelsonville Redistricting. It'll take you to the website, and all kinds of info, public comment in there. Please, if you don't have to make a full map even, like, if you just wanna share just one ward, like, this is what I want Ward 3 to look like, you know, this is what I want Ward 4, the college district to look like, you know, this is, you know, I want downtown to look like this. Send them all in, you know, send your comments. Please take advantage of resources on there, play around with the map, and please reach out to me, and I'll send you a follow-up. I'll invite you to the next public meeting, and next time, you know, we'll actually do hopefully I'll get some feedback and some ideas, and I'll be able to show those, and then also we'll do some actual drawing and maybe mess around to see where we could draw these lines at. Alright?
I have one more thing.
When do you hope to put the proposed map before council?
July. So there are some
I mean,
deadlines.
End of July or? I mean, we're in.
There's only one
June
council
now.
meeting in July, so it
We're
will be the
almost-
second, it'll be at the end.
Okay,
And
the third.
council
Or
doesn't
whenever-
currently
whenever
does
that
not
one
have the
council
authority
meeting
to
is.
approve
Right.
maps. There are no
Yeah.
wards under the charter.
Oh, yeah, so that's what I was,
Territory.
earlier I said I would get into, so, going back to those different committees who does redistricting, there are also committees that the city council will appoint that do not have authority to actually, they can propose maps, but they can't, put them in, they can't implement them in any way.
Yeah.
And it is in that capacity that the League of Women Voters of Athens County and the League of Women Voters of Ohio is functioning here with the City Council of Nelsonville. They've asked us to be kind of an advisory committee to propose a map, a ward map for the city. So then they themselves will, well, the idea I'm thinking is that, they will be able to put that on the shelf for the incoming city council in January to implement. And, there are requirements in the revised code. The incoming city council will have 90 days to implement a district ward map. And so this is something that we're hoping that they'll see and be like, hey, it's already done for us. It has the buy-in from the people of Nelsonville. We've engaged with citizens throughout all these months. People are happy with it. This is what they want to see. So we'll just boom, do it, because they're gonna have a lot on their plates.
How can they run if they don't represent a particular ward?
Well,
Who
that's,
decides about the wards?
well, that's another question, and I think Mr. Rowe,
Temporary.
within a city council meeting, and him and Mr. Courtney on the ad hoc committee, I believe, I am in agreement with their interpretation that, so when a city first graduates from a village to a city, they go into that statutory form of government. Now, when they go into that statutory form of government, they don't have districts. They're elected at large, and then once they're seated, they create the districts, which will go into effect.
So that's
the
what will
next-
happen with wards?
That's that's our interpretation that I share with the
So
city
they're running
attorney.
at large, and then they sort it out later?
Yes.
Yes, they'll run at large, and then once they're seated in January, they could implement the map that we propose, or they could just create their own, and,
And we'll hopefully meet all the requirements.
alright. But hopefully, we'll have this great process that we've been engaged in over the few months, and we'll have so much buy-in from the city,
Yeah.
and they will feel like not only, kind of obligated to adopt it, but pride in adopting it, and hopefully moving forward.
I've just got one more request. We have excellent representation here from the media. The address that he gave you, please find more than one time that you can publish that, because I do think that people might actually use it. And if you only get 2, and then you get 4, and then you get 30, that would be huge.
Yeah.
Please, that would be amazing,
Yes,
because
thank
they
you.
do read you, and call that radio station and have them do it.
Yeah.
There we go.
Because I will read those public comments. I will read every single one of them. I will look at every single map that is sent my way, any kind of proposed wards. I will put them into Dave's. I will do what I can to make this the most transparent process and the most successful. Because I want everybody. I want the more folks that participate, the better. That's the way democracy works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will the public comment section on the website be like, I can see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Research.
Are you gonna moderate? Are you a moderator, or will they just go up as soon as people comment?
You should do
Well,
them unfiltered,
yeah.
you'll get a taste for what it's like.
Yeah,
maybe
not.
Yeah.
Nelsonville.
No, I think that
I think unfiltered is a great idea.
I would love, yeah, I would love that.
I
And
think you'll get a
then,
genuine feel for what it's like here in Nelsonville.
I'm not our communications person, so I'm not sure how much she'll let up there. But it's,
I would, honestly, I wouldn't wanna get, you should.
but I will advocate for
We should record
complete
the Nelsonville
transparency.
crackheads who are.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But yes,
Exactly.
I will advocate for complete transparency. I want to hear what people have to say and opinions and feedback and concerns and ideas.
I'm sure the rest of us do
And
too,
if-
so I appreciate the transparency.
Yeah, and if anybody in the community wants to make their voice heard sooner rather than later, you can scan this little QR code for
That
fill
as
out the
well,
form.
yeah.
Where can you post that?
You can go to What's Next Nelsonville on Facebook, or you can also just take a photo of it on your phone and scan it
Or
later.
if I remember to bring my phone, it would be a really good idea.
It's also a website, so I can get you just a link to the website.
That would be, but
Oh, yeah.
everybody
it's
should
Google
have
form.
that, not just me.
Yeah, we're just traversing it.
No,
We'll
it's
get it
spread
on-
it.
It's
we'll
just
put
a
on
Google
perspectives,
form.
viewpoints.
Spread it,
Once you get
guys.
the link, you can share it with whomever, as long as they're local to Nelsonville. We want to hear their thoughts and feelings so that we can share them with.
We're gonna hope to
Our
come
local
around
government.
neighborhoods and just have
that's
this.
great.
just-
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
It's been a pretty worthwhile process so far, with the option of remaining anonymous or providing, contact info for follow-up. People have felt very comfortable being honest with
Excellent,
us.
excellent.
Yep. Yeah.
Responses in 4 days.
17.
And there is
17
no
responses in
moderation.
4 days.
I am so all for it.
Yeah.
That's great.
We're looking for
I thank-
5,000
I
responses.
thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate it.
And we have
Um,
the raffle.
And oh yes,
Yeah,
But,
put it
yeah,
in.
I've got
Oh, yes,
some
the
t-shirts.
raffle.
The raffle. No,